The gaming industry these days is a completely different beast to what it was over 2 decades ago, and because of this, some of your favourite PS2 games probably wouldn't be released, at least in the same way, today. Hello viewers, it's good to see you. I'm Will from Cultured Vultures. I did not see a PS2 until I was already a man, and these are the PS2 games that wouldn't get made today.
Pigs, run!
Now, given that we're going to be receiving a Blade game at some point in the future, we're not saying that we're never going to see Frank Castle star in his own game again, though hopefully not something like whatever this was. The character still ranks among the most popular and recognisable comic book characters ever made, so it's probably only a matter of time until someone decides to make the Punisher the star of a video game once again. All we're saying is that it probably won't be quite as violent as Volition's 2005 release. Released as a sort of semi-tie-in sequel to the Thomas Jane fronted film from a year earlier, Volition's The Punisher saw the actor return to voice Castle, as he goes on his usual one-man rampage across New York against various crime families. While the action is fairly standard, albeit with the added ability to take human shields, to yeet them or perform close-range melee attacks, what really set The Punisher apart was its interrogations and executions. Basically, in order to get the information or hints out of a perp, you'd have to threaten, intimidate them, or even pummel the bad guys, before killing them in some of the most gruesome ways imaginable. Wood chippers, flesh-eating piranhas, and an actual hanging all feature. And while there's room for some gory games like Mortal Kombat in today's landscape, do we really think a Disney-owned Marvel is going to go for that? R-rated movies might be one thing, but committing to that with a video game is another story entirely.
Learn to drive, dumbass! Ow! My neck!
Surely top of everyone's please remaster this list, The Simpsons Hit and Run didn't have any right to be as good as it was. Radical Entertainment had already courted controversy by ripping off the crazy taxi formula a couple of years earlier in The Simpsons Road Rage, something that would cause Sega to sue Radical Entertainment for patent infringement. Radical's prior reputation of concept copying led many to believe that The Simpsons Hit and Run would just be a basic GTA clone with a few gags and Simpsons references thrown in. And don't get us wrong, it is the most unabashed GTA clone you've ever seen,
Which was the style at the time?
but it does so in a way that feels entirely Simpson-esque, offering a fun game with all the humour you'd expect from a golden era episode of the show. Playing as Homer, Marge, Bart and Lisa, along with a poo for some reason, the 5 characters travel across Springfield, unravelling the cause of a surveillance conspiracy that could affect the fate of the whole town. While the possibility of The Simpsons Hit and Run getting made today is pretty low, merely down to the inclusion of Apu, who was removed from the show due to the backlash because the character wasn't voiced by someone from India, and probably the fees to pay the cast is just too high, but those aren't the main reasons. Truth be told, it's much easier for Fox and Disney to license The Simpsons to games like Fortnite, Roblox and Minecraft, and others to make guest appearances instead of commissioning someone to make a brand new AAA game. Any new Simpsons game is going to be just a mobile game loaded with microtransactions similar to Tapped Out. That is the unfortunate truth, even if it does make us want to punch Lenny in the back of the head. Question time. What was the name of Homer's long-lost brother? Drop your answer in the comments down below to win a free Steam key. For free! Steam key! For free! If you couldn't tell from the music that plays in most of our PS2 era videos, we bloody love Bully, or Canis Canem Edit as it was known originally in the UK. Hold on, I'll stop talking for a minute so you can hear it. There, you see? Rivaling even Rockstar's own work on the GTA series at the time. Sometimes you just want to deal with high school hijinks and drama than having to deal with an entire city's criminal underworld looking to either hire you or kill you. One fact that needs to be confronted though, Rockstar just isn't the same company as it was. Back during the PS2 and PS3 days, Rockstar was releasing at least one game a year. But after the launch of GTA 5, the well has dried up considerably. Unless it's GTA or Red Dead, both games considered to be proven needle movers, Rockstar just isn't going to bother. regardless of whether it's Bully, Midnight Club, Smuggler's Run or table tennis. Additionally, unless you're following Atlas's example of using high school as a means to tell a different story, it's hard to see a mainstream gaming studio make a title about stuffing kids into lockers, especially after the controversy caused by Bully's original release. You don't even play as a bully in Bully, but the fact that you could be a terror on the playground meant that controversy swiftly followed, hence the UK name change. Indie games like Troublemaker or Project Sugar might try to offer some schoolyard scrapping action, while Lost Judgment's side stories gave us a heightened reality take on life as part of a Japanese high school, but we'll probably never see a big company go hard on a concept like this again. Well, unless Atlas wants to abandon the supernatural elements of Persona for a Barney behind the bike sheds instead.
Come out and fight me with this boy! Come on!
Now listen, Devil May Cry would absolutely get released today, as Capcom are still up for putting out plenty of games about carving up big monsters with a sword. On top of that, while they may not sound like gangbusters every time, people love playing action games that allow you to perform stylish combos on monsters unfortunate enough to be in your vicinity. While it's been about 6 years since the last Devil May Cry game, we still think Capcom has it within themselves to make a new game, especially as the Netflix anime from the creators of the Castlevania series is on the horizon. Series director Hideki Itsuno may have left Capcom, but other franchises have lived on long after some key staff have called it quits in the past, so DMC can do it too. What we're referring to with Devil May Cry not getting made today is the process by which it was made. You'll have heard this story before, but the gameplay and combat for Devil May Cry came about due to a glitch when Capcom was making Onimusha, unintentionally allowing players to perform juggle combos. Meanwhile, Hideki Kamiya and others were trying to make Resident Evil 4, but felt the game wouldn't suit the RE formula. Kamiya saw the Onimusha glitch and decided to reproduce it in his project, and the result was Devil May Cry. It's all very haphazard, lightning in the bottle stuff, and it just feels like the unintentional ideas and the creation of accidental magic aren't given the chance to be explored in the AAA gaming space. Especially when games are taking longer and longer to make. Where would a studio even find time to make a brand new idea alongside their core IP these days? As Naughty Dog has shown you, you just don't.
The good old days.
Where do we begin with a game like Mr. Mosquito? Arguably one of the most weird games ever made. Any version of Mr. Mosquito that would get made today probably wouldn't include a level where you're sucking blood on a teenage girl as she's taking a bath, especially one published by Sony. Shout out to Astrobot though. As a mosquito, it's your job to harvest enough blood from the Yamada family to ensure you have enough food to last through the winter. So across the game's 12 levels, you'll sneakily try and get blood from the family without them spotting you. Alerting the family to your presence can result in instant death if you're feeding, while flying around triggers a boss battle of sorts. Say what you want about Mr. Mosquito, it's definitely unique and innovative for its time. Unfortunately, that one-of-a-kind nature is going to be the reason why we'll never see a game like Mr. Mosquito ever again. While the game was published worldwide by Fresh Games, a subsidiary of Eidos designed to port games from Japan, the original Japanese release was published by Sony, with Japan Studio even assisting on the game's development. These days, Sony wouldn't be caught dead making a game like Mr. Mosquito, even though they're definitely glad they did make it once upon a time, even porting it to the PS4 and PS5 for nostalgia. Games like Mr. Mosquito are something that Sony can point to in games like Astrobot and say, look at the imagination we have on offer, before peddling a remaster to games that we've already bought twice already. Any version of Mr. Mosquito made today would be a Steam indie game, and Sony/PlayStation just aren't going to play in that space. Anyone expecting either one of Metallica's best songs or an angry J.K. Simmons launching stuff at your head will probably be disappointed by the premise of Whiplash, a 3D platformer by Crystal Dynamics of all people. You control Spanx, not what your mum's got on her Amazon wishlist for Christmas, but instead a long-tailed weasel that has been chained to a psychotic rabbit named Redmond, with the two forced to work together in order to escape an animal testing facility. Instead of using stealth, cunning or guile to accomplish your goals though, Spanx basically flings Redmond around the place, using him to batter human scientists or traverse the various hazards that litter the laboratory. As you think the idea of using a rabbit like a mace to dispatch your enemies sounds like it would piss off animal rights groups, then you'd be correct. Again, the bulk of the controversy seemed to occur in the UK with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the chairman of the House of Commons and even the police all bashing Whiplash ahead of release. Much like Bully a few years later, Whiplash appeared to those people like a game encouraging animal cruelty, while the story and messaging of the game was about trying to stop an animal testing facility. It's just that Whiplash did it in a very Looney Tunes inspired way, complete with cartoon levels of silly violence. The furore didn't stop Whiplash from selling, but in today's climate, with organisations like PETA staging protests inside Animal Crossing, or PETA running the Mario Kills Tanuki campaign, releasing a game like Whiplash would be a headache no modern publisher wants to deal with. You think PETA would do something about their ridiculous kill rate within animal shelters before throwing stones or killing animals or whatever their favourite hobbies are, but what do we know? We've seen plenty of video games try to put their spin on the Vietnam War, largely seen as one of the most pointless conflicts in a human history filled with them. Good soundtrack though. Oftentimes, gaming's depiction of Vietnam amounts to a bunch of patriotic Americans mowing down everything that moves while Fortunate Son plays in the background. But some try to shine a bit of light on the more brutal elements of it all. The fear, the dread, the prevalence of drugs and prostitution. You don't get any of that playing Call of Duty Black Ops aside from one deer hunter reminiscent scene. And that's why Shell Shock Nam 67 is somewhat interesting, as Guerrilla Games made no attempt to clean up the perception of the Vietnam War. Yes, those Guerrilla Games, by the way. Well, Shell Shock didn't launch with too much controversy at the time, even spawning a sequel in 2009. It's definitely not getting a PS Plus Classics port anytime soon, and it's possibly because how it refuses to shy away from the worst parts of the conflict. Games based on real life conflicts, or even ones inspired by real life conflicts, will often tell a more sanitized version of events because people these days don't want to feel bad as they hold down the R2 button or purchase their Goku skins. Now, we're not saying Shell Shock handled the issue with taste, as the prostitutes proclaiming their so horny haven't aged well. But between this and Spec Ops: The Line military shooters that depict war as hell and not Nicki Minaj's Weird Day Out in Fallujah aren't that common anymore. At this point, it just feels as though bringing up Burnout is just an effort to goad Electronic Arts into doing something with the property instead of just sitting on it. While Need for Speed gets countless releases every year, despite the fact that our needs for speed are quite low. I am full of speed, thank you though. The earliest Burnout games, especially Burnout 2 Point of Impact, were a great antithesis to the other racing games out there, encouraging players to perform more stunts and take more risks to earn more boost to get the edge over their opponents. But it's Burnout 3 Takedown where the series really shines. The introduction of a takedown mechanic rewarding players for racing dirty instead of clean made for a cathartic experience, especially as you just watch the replay of a rival car flying into the air because you've just ran them into a city bus. And throw in the excellent crash mode and a brilliant punk rock / emo soundtrack, and it's no wonder that Burnout 3 is beloved as it is, and we're never getting it again. With EA focusing Criterion's efforts on Need for Speed, the Burnout series has been left to rot since the party game Burnout Crash back in 2011. Making a racing game with the destruction and carnage as the main focus doesn't seem to be a priority anymore for larger racing game developers, and the reasons for that are unclear. It's possible that car manufacturers are unwilling to hand over licenses to their cars if they're going to look like they've ended up on a scrap heap, or all the pile-ups causing a bit of fuss in the news. Meanwhile, indie developers like Three Fields Entertainment, formed by ex-Burnout devs, are trying to revive the destructive arcade racer, but it's not like any of them have EA level money behind them. Another one in the column of invented Sony games that they're glad they've already made. Ico was a huge part of Sony's exclusive lineup for the PS2. Ico follows the titular hero as he's dragged off to a castle to be sacrificed. The lad escapes and quickly runs into Yorda, a fellow captive who speaks a strange language. Before long, the two are having to run from shadowy creatures as the two try to find a way to leave the castle behind them. In terms of premise alone, Ico could have easily been made today, as trying to guide and protect an NPC companion is nothing particularly rare. Only Ico has a cool cooler art style. What's stopping Ico from being made today is the fact that the game is incredibly, wonderfully simplistic. For a large part of the game, you're either pushing or pulling objects to solve puzzles, holding hands with Yorda to guide her through the castle, or dodging shadow creatures looking to pulverize you. A modern Sony game these days would need to add some kind of RPG progression system, DLC costumes for Ico and Yorda, and a string of other miscellaneous bollocks that would get in the way of the game's original spirit. Bluepoint could certainly accomplish a proper remake of Ico, considering they pulled off the Shadow of the Colossus remake skillfully. But again, that simplicity would stop Sony from being able to charge $50 to $70 for the next big exclusive. And we're not convinced Sony are interested unless it's some kind of big statement release or an absolutely hideous hero shooter. What am I even looking at here? Is this a bin holding a vape? Oh gang, oh boy, golly gosh, and so on and so forth. Released as Fugitive Hunter War on Terror in the US, which is a much worse name if we're being honest. America's 10 Most Wanted gave players the opportunity to compromise Osama bin Laden to a permanent end. Controlling generic American military man number 37, who we're just going to make up a name for, let's say Jonathan Mastodon. There you go. Jonathan travels around the world taking down some of the biggest terrorists and wanted criminals of the time period. Considering this was released in 2003, the list includes all your favourite baddies, including the likes of Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. Alright, we have to give Black Ops Entertainment its credit for using real life terrorists for the bosses, instead of just fabricating a vaguely Middle Eastern country and making them the villains. We're looking at you, Modern Warfare. Right at you. That is where the praise ends though, as America's 10 Most Wanted is a barely held together turd of an FPS game that inexplicably turns into Tekken whenever you're about to take down one of the most wanted. Seriously guys, there is a 3D fighting game mechanic in this military shooter, and it's very much plops, as it should be if we're honest. But it's still ridiculous to think about. Like we covered in Shell Shock, most military shooters like to shy away from the realities of various conflicts, so naturally no one is going to want to make a new version of America's 10 Most Wanted. And putting real people in games without their blessing probably wouldn't fly today legally, even if they are massive terrorists. It also helps that since Osama and Saddam died, the world doesn't seem to have the same kind of universally hated person to villainize. Actually, you know what, Eric Sparrow? You now officially have a purpose. And that is our list of the PS2 games that would not get made today. What PS2 games do you like that you think wouldn't get made today? I love to bang on about it, but Gregory Horror Show, great game. It wouldn't get made today at all. It's just a vibe, man. That's just how I feel. I mean, honestly, it probably shouldn't have got made back then, but it did and it exists and I love it. But tell us yours, let us know in the comments down below. And remember, we'll see you soon.